Ahoy hoy, I am Planartalk, and today we are live with Professor Dave Explains, or Professor Dave as he's probably might prefer to be called. What do you prefer?
Or just Dave Farina. Well, I'm Professor Dave on the channel. In real life, I'm just Dave Farina.
Okay. And what you heard there just before was actually one of Dave's tracks.
This is true. Yeah, I some people do know this about me, some don't. I'm a musician, lifelong musician, and actually spent the entirety of my 20s trying to be successful in music with various bands. One of which went almost all the way, signed and touring and all that stuff, and found some setbacks. And in the midst of those setbacks, my YouTube channel came to be, and so I sort of turned to that as the A plan. And I still have plans for music, though, with Simulated Sun in particular. I'm just sort of trying. I'm focusing on science communication at the moment, as that's what is actually fruitful and working in my life. So I'm focusing on that, but all the while on the back burner, I have plans for music when that is possible.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm going to start with talking about some of your recent debates that you've had recently.
Sure.
You've got the one with Kent Hovind, and you've also got the one with Jesse Lee Peterson. How do you feel about them?
Well, I mean, they're very different. The one with Kent was, I got asked to do it, and I looked up some of his stuff and immediately realized what he is, which is just an unparalleled charlatan. And I went in there pretty hot-headed, looking to take him down, and I think I got some really good jabs in. But on the whole, he sort of gish-galloped around me. So, I did most of what I wanted to do there. But who knows? Maybe we will square off again. With Jesse, it was totally different. When Modern Day Debates asked me if I wanted to debate or discuss with him, I didn't know who he was, and I looked it up, and I was just floored. I couldn't believe, he doesn't seem like a real person. He seems like a parody of something. So I don't know. I agreed because I was like, this will be fun. I'll just kind of let him talk and respond, which is what I did. And,
I do really like the meme that came out of that, the data meme.
That was I'm not a very good improviser, but I'm shocked that I was able to improvise that. He just said beta to me so many times that I was like, all right, this is ridiculous. And he's a caricature of a person. I didn't, I don't know what else to say about him.
One of the arguments that I've recently had with someone is data versus data.
I think it's a dialect thing. I believe they're probably equivalently valid pronunciations. I think data would be more of like a British pronunciation. I say data. I think more important is the distinction that data is a plural noun. A lot of people don't know that. Datum would be the singular.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So these data, things like that.
Yeah. One thing I do have to ask is, do you think Kent was prepared for the debate with you?
Well, of course he was. He runs this. He has a singular script that he's been running for 30 years. You can watch any debate he ever has, and you could copy and paste portions from one to the other, and it would be no different. I mean, I had an opening statement saying that he would say, "This book says a thing," and his entire opening statement was, "This book says a thing," and he addressed not my opening statement, but videos that I had done in the past, despite the fact that he said, "Oh, I just heard of you today." It's like, no, you didn't. You went and downloaded my videos for you to respond to. So, he's got a script. It's it works apparently, or he wouldn't be doing what he's doing. But that's it.
Yeah, well, because one of the things that actually happened a small while before you had your debate with Kent Hovind is he had a debate with Conspiracy Cats.
Yeah.
And in that debate, basically, this came out of it.
I'm not prepared for that.
That's a good meme, yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised that he agreed to do the debate with you, because I was thinking, wow, like, Conspiracy Cats tore him a new one. Then when he did the debate with you, I felt like you tore him a new one. And
yeah, the thing is, I let him get out of corners too much. So when it was very clear, when he said something that made it very clear that he knows zero things about genetics, like he couldn't pass a ninth grade biology quiz. I let him squirm out of the corner. Like there was that one classic moment where we were talking about meiosis, and he basically goes, "Abdia, abdia, 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 abdia. Rabbits don't have wings." I mean, it's like, instead of answering why that is a dumb thing to say, I should have said, "Wow, Kent, like you're really dodging genetics here, and you're really dodging talking about the Bible." I mean, he's a dodgy guy, and if I had been more of a seasoned debater, I mean, this guy does this every single day. If I had had a little more experience, I mean, honestly, even if I were to debate him one more time in that format, I wouldn't let him get out of corners like that. So I was a little too easy on him.
do you think he'll debate you, though? Because he's refused to debate Katz ever again.
Right, because he knows that he'll be made a fool of. No, he won't, because I issued the challenge to him. I made another video with my 5 questions, and instead of agreeing to the debate, he just made his response videos where he gets to just talk in his echo chamber and say, spout his lies. And, he complains that I just interrupt him, whereas in the format of the debate that I outlined, it very specifically states that certain amount of time, uninterrupted time, will be allotted for him to respond to the questions. So he's full of it. He just knows that, he knows that if he were to face me again in a true debate fashion, that I would just eviscerate him. But
I think I remember seeing the debate, and what happened is sometimes he would say something about let's go one point at a time, yet he would also gish gallop you.
Well, yeah, but that's his shtick. He complains about going one topic at a time, but when it suits him to change the topic, he changes the topic. So, he either changes the topic, or he just tries to run out the clock by saying the same talking point over and over again. Like, you believe this came from that, and you believe this came from that, knowingly obfuscating the terminology of evolution to trick. I mean, he's not debating me. He's just spewing out a script to fool his fan base, to keep them pumping in the donations. That's what he does.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I mean, he's so dishonest that I can deconstruct what it is, or the whole life came from a rock thing. I can explain to him with crystal clarity why that's an invalid thing to say, and he'll say it again to my face 5 minutes later. I mean, this is the level of intellectual dishonesty is unparalleled. It's actually quite shocking to interact with. But I am. This all started with the flat Earth thing, and I found that I was provoked into being sort of this debater, and I'm still new to it, but I really like it, and I think that I'm going to continue to try to pursue it on a larger scale. So I just consider these things, this skirmish with Kent. I learned a lot. The thing with Jesse, Jesse, that's not even a debate. That was just me toying with a simpleton. I want to get better at this, and I want to take on charlatans and expose them. This is something I really want. I feel compelled to do. So,
speaking of charlatans, have you ever? I saw that you did a video on Electric Universe recently.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Ken Wheeler?
I have.
Okay. So, about one of his statements that I remember is he says that gravity is not an autonomous field modality. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, he just, he is one of the most egregious examples of these types of channels, some of which have been attacking me for my accurate depiction of Electric Universe, which is the Wall Thornhill specific camp within that broader flavor of ridiculous. He is specifically one of these people who says things like gravity doesn't really exist. And that's kind of who I was talking about for a certain section of that video. Some people took it the wrong way and have been attacking me as though I was applying that broadly to some other subset of physics, which Obviously, I wasn't, even though their brand is also invalid. But it's become a bit of a mess. I won't go into it too deeply, but I've been receiving threats by email, slander, and by one channel in particular. And I'm most likely going to formally respond despite the threats. So we will see how that pans out. Yeah.
Yeah, because I actually remember finding out about Ken Wheeler, and immediately when I found out about him, I sent one of his videos to AB Science, and then I sat on that video idea for a while. Eventually, AB Science decided that he was going to tackle Ken Wheeler's magnetism thing, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to get onto that video. And so we made a video addressing Ken Wheeler. There were a few people that came along saying all different things, like, oh, you just don't understand him. And it's like, well, most of his stuff that he says is word salad. So
yeah, I mean, here is the issue, and in looking a little more closely at electric universe and these types of phenomena, also quantum mysticism. I'm actually writing a book right now on public science literacy and hoaxes and cons of all these varieties. And all of these things are able to exist because of the extreme power of the narrative that mainstream science or the establishment is wrong and these brave rebels speak the truth. It is such an attractive narrative that people who do not understand anything about science and don't really care about science will fixate on this narrative and be attracted to these kinds of people. So it's really just, so that's part one of it. And then the other aspect is that armchair scientists want to believe that that they can understand physics better than Einstein without ever having even studied physics at all. It's an extreme version of the Dunning-Kruger effect, and so they latch on to these armchair scientists that have these YouTube channels because it validates them, right? It says that what these people represent is that, hey, I'm just some guy. I don't have a fancy physics degree, but I know physics better than Einstein, and so can you. Right? It's a very attractive narrative, and that's what people fall for, is this feeling of empowerment and security and assuredness, whereas in fact science is really, really hard to understand. And you know that when you study science. So for example, I've studied chemistry. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and nearly finished a master's degree in organic chemistry, though I did not complete it and switched over to science education for my master's. But in receiving that education, I realized that not only I'm not an expert in chemistry, I am nowhere near qualified to discuss the forefront of any other scientific field. That's why on my channel, I explain high school physics. I explain high school and early undergraduate chemistry and biochemistry and these kinds of subjects, because this is very basic stuff that you can summarize out of a textbook. I would never weigh in on like what dark matter is or something like that. I keep my mouth shut about those things because I'm not an expert. So when these people who have no education in these fields contradict the leading experts, I mean, it's just, this is a really big symptom of what's wrong with the world today, and possibly America disproportionately.
I think that there is probably something to people that they want to understand things, like maybe take some flat earthers. I don't think all flat earthers fit this, but some flat earthers probably want to understand things, and they feel like if the earth were flat, it means that they can disregard most of science and sort of start their own science sort of thing.
Right.
And
you
science
don't have
is
to learn
easy
science
to do.
if science isn't true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy to sort of take a picture of a horizon and go, see, that's flat, therefore Earth is flat.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, flat Earth is barely even worth talking about in this regard. I think it's more applicable to something like electric universe, where magnetism and electricity and cosmology, these things are legitimately difficult to understand. So somebody can make up some things and dress them up in the guise of scientific jargon, and it's easy to fool people. Whereas flat Earth, I mean, it doesn't take an ounce of scientific understanding to know that the Earth isn't flat. That's how we learned that it wasn't flat before science existed, right? The ancient Greeks figured out it's not flat because of sunrises and sunsets, and because you can always see the same face of the moon, and because of the opposite rotation in opposite hemispheres of the celestial sphere. I mean, really basic, like, hey, look at that, therefore the Earth is round. You know what I mean? So flat Earth is just a bizarre phenomenon, probably a psyop. I don't really know about that. But the rest, quantum mysticism and all alternative health stuff, this is people taking advantage of a confused population in an unfair way. So that I've pretty much graduated from flat Earth as a ridiculous entry point into an elementary school level debunking point into sort of I want to tackle these broader issues that we face now that actually are relevant to the population.
Yeah.
So.
I do have a question that is somewhat in the flat Earth realm. So this is about independent variables. I'm assuming you know a lot about these. So this is something that I will ask any scientist or any science educator. So can an independent variable be a presumed influencing factor, or must it be the presumed cause in an experiment?
Well, it doesn't have to be presumed anything, right? You select one, and then you observe its effect or alleged effect on some other variable, right? It can be anything. But that's the point with these flat earthers or other groups too, is they take they like to talk about the scientific method, and they'll quote the version of the scientific method that they learned in like third grade or something, and pretend that it is some kind of gospel or doctrine as to how science must be done. I mean, this is ridiculous. When I was working in a chemistry lab, you have a reaction you're going to do, and you do it, and you see if it worked. Right? There's no hypothesis. It doesn't fit that simplistic model. It's still science. Yeah. Chemistry is science. When you do chemical reactions, you're doing science.
Yeah.
When you analyze your product, when you isolate it, so it's just them trying to take this unbelievably limited pseudo understanding of the scientific method and try to apply it broadly to the entire body of science, which is just, it's insane.
Yeah, like I do understand the whole sort of thing of an experiment that they try and force everything into. But the thing is, it's one of them things which I think they misunderstand more than myself, and I could be wrong. Maybe they're understanding it perfectly fine, but it seems that when I try to push them on why it's that way, so when I try and get into the philosophy of it, they go, "Oh, philosophy isn't science," and it's like, and my idea is that, well, actually, philosophy kind of designed the scientific method.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I'm not well versed in philosophy, but obviously, anytime you're talking about what is epistemologically relevant, right? Epistemology is a branch of philosophy that deals with what we know. So, yeah, I mean, philosophy of science is a pretty heady field, and you can get pretty deep down a rabbit hole. And as far as I'm concerned, it's about falsifiable predictions, right? So. I think that if I have this cannon, how far is the cannonball going to go as a function of the angle to the horizontal? So there's your independent variable, right? Independent variable, I can make the angle whatever I want. The dependent variable, how far it goes. Okay, well, I think I have this equation that tells me how far the cannonball is going to go, and if I point the cannon at the 30 degrees, it's going to go this many meters, and it's going to land right on this spot, and then it does do that.
Yeah. Okay,
so my equation is correct, and I do a different angle, and again, I told you it did do that, so my equation is correct. Right? This is what is lost on people who do not understand science, is the falsifiability of claims. Right? You have to make a falsifiable claim, like on this date there is going to be an eclipse, and the shadow of the sun is going to down to the second and down to the square mile trace this path along the United States. Look. One single time of this happening is a validation of the heliocentric model beyond beyond reasonable doubt, let alone the thousands of other things that we could say about the positions of the celestial objects. At this time, it'll be here. On this year, Halley's Comet is going to be there. Like, it's falsifiability and it's quantifiable. This is what is lost on non-scientists or people who refuse to understand what science is, you know.
Yeah, well, when it comes to flat earthers, they never really make any falsifiable claims. Their shtick usually is trying to poke holes in the globe model. Like, for example, when it comes to Cavendish, the first thing that they'll say when it comes to that is they'll ask you, okay, what is your independent variable, right? And I usually say something like mass, and they say, well, if your independent variable is mass, then you're not proving that gravity is the cause. And it's like, you don't understand the scientific method at that point.
I mean, you could talk for an hour about how dumb that is. They're saying, yes, mass is the independent variable and acceleration is the dependent variable. The rate of acceleration due to the gravitational attraction is what is being measured. Yeah. And they talk as though Cavendish did this experiment once upon a time and it has never been replicated. People do this every year, all the time. And it's not just this thing too. You can take a weight and suspend it from something where we are measuring the weight of that thing that is suspended by the tension in the string, and then you can place a very very dense object under it, right? A huge like lead ball or something really heavy and dense. Place it under it, and you can measure the additional gravitational attraction that is directly underneath that downward vector. It will register. You can measure it. So I mean, there's just so many ways to demonstrate gravity that when they say things like gravity doesn't exist, it's just like where are you even going to go from there? Like you don't even understand the most basic aspects of Newtonian mechanics. Where are we, like, then you want to talk about Einstein? How are we going to talk about Einstein if you don't understand F equals ma? Like the most utterly basic facts in physics. Like, well, I don't know. Like that's. Sorry, go ahead.
The most ridiculous thing I've heard is somebody. Okay, get ready for this. There was this person who was claiming that Einstein superseded Newton and replaced Newtonian physics. Therefore, Cavendish doesn't prove gravity because it doesn't prove that space-time is bending.
Yeah. So this is another popular myth that science illiterate people like to push. Is that, well, we had Newton and then Einstein came, so Newton is gone. And then we have another thing that is going to come later, so Einstein's going to be gone. No, that's not how it works. Newtonian mechanics works immaculately for almost everything. It only doesn't work for things that are like an atom or smaller, and things going close to the speed of light. That's where the Newtonian paradigm doesn't encapsulate the properties or what we can talk about there. But we still use Newton's law of universal gravitation to send things to Neptune or whatever. We use these equations. Terrestrial motion is modeled immaculately by Newton's laws. It works just fine. So I think that people do not understand the concept of paradigm shift. And even when you have something as monumental as the quantum revolution, which truly did change physics, it was insane how much physics was changed by that. It does not invalidate any of the physics that existed previously. It deepens our understanding of phenomena and gives us models that we can apply to things that the Newtonian paradigm wasn't able to explain. That's it.
Yeah, well, I've actually heard people claiming that quantum physics doesn't exist.
Yeah, okay, I don't get it, so it's not real. That's basically a summary of that.
Yeah,
that concept.
Or the funnier one is one person that claims that atoms don't exist. And you're a chemist, so...
the field of chemistry exists, so we know that atoms exist, and yet we still call it atomic theory, by the way.
Oh.
That's another thing that really boils my blood is the people who operate as though the word theory implies uncertainty. I can't tell you how many times a day I hear that's just a theory or it's only a theory, and Okay, well, you don't know what a theory is, right? Atomic theory is a model that correlates data about chemical reactions, masses, volumes, and explains them with the notion or the postulate that atoms exist. And we certainly know they exist now, but it doesn't change the fact that it is a theory. It is a model that correlates data. It does not become a law, right? Theories never become laws. And they're not uncertainty. The germ theory of disease, we know for sure that bacteria exist and viruses exist. So,
except some people would disagree, and that's kind of depressing, especially these days.
It is extremely depressing.
But yeah, when it comes to the whole theory thing, I actually heard Tim Minchin talk about theory, particularly pertaining to evolution, because that's one of things a lot of creationists like to say is, but evolution is just a theory. And I really enjoy Tim Minchin's take on this, where he said, well, it makes you hope that they feel the same way about the theory of gravity, and then they just float away.
Yeah, I mean, even gravity, right? You have Newton's law of universal gravitation, an equation that describes the effects of gravity. And then you have Einstein's theory of general relativity, which is a model that correlates data, and it has more explanatory power. That's the point. A law is just this is what happens, right? It doesn't explain why. A theory explains why. Einstein's theory of general relativity explains the curvature of space-time. So it explains what Newton did not Newton himself was baffled by gravity. He knew that it existed and what it does, but he did not know why. Right, Einstein was able to elucidate why, and it seems that we have some more work to do with gravity in order to reconcile it with quantum mechanics. So hopefully in the next 20, 30, 100 years, we'll have an even better understanding of gravity. But this whole thing of theories, yeah, it's definitely one of my pet peeves. So.
Yeah, it's same here, because you get it more. I used to think that it was just creationists, and now flat earthers are bringing it up as well.
Well, but so that's why I consider it so urgent. Is it's not just them. It's in the collective consciousness. It's the common vernacular. The common vernacular in our culture is that a theory is a guess, and so not everybody uses it to slander science. Right? Some people with an agenda use it that way. Some people just say, "Oh, a theory is it's a guess," and they're not really invested in pseudoscience. But we need to, as a culture, strip the word of this colloquial connotation. Either if you mean a guess and you want to sound sciencey, you either say hypothesis or you say guess. Right? Theory does not mean guess. Period. So let's either say hypothesis or don't talk that way, or just like everybody needs to revise the way they use that word, because that colloquial connotation is what arms pseudoscientists and con men to trick others into thinking that science is uncertain when it's not. Is basically it.
Yeah. Like, one person I was trying to explain the difference between a hypothesis, a law, and a theory. And basically, when it comes to a hypothesis, it is I wouldn't necessarily just call it a guess. I'd say that it's more of an educated guess.
Yes, an educated guess. But at the very least, if somebody wants to paint something as uncertain, there is some validity there, right? Because a hypothesis is something that does get upgraded when data has been collected, right? But a theory does never get upgraded. Theories do not become laws, right? Theories remain theories no matter how much they are corroborated beyond reasonable doubt. So that's all I mean, is that if you want to say hypothesis, it's not precisely scientific, but at least you're saying, okay, it's a thing that I believe, and if I learn some more things, I may figure out if it is true or not true. Right, that's I can live with that. If people use the hypothesis that way, I'd be okay with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. One thing that you did mention earlier was about germ theory, and obviously everyone knows about what's going on with the coronavirus, and I'm glad you actually made a video on the whole. On all these conspiracy theories that are going on to do with it, because they're absolutely crazy. I'm assuming you've heard about the whole statements that have been going around by Donald Trump.
Oh, this inject something and whatever.
Yeah.
Just Trump talking out his ass about things that he has no business talking about.
Yeah. People got mad at me saying that because apparently he said if you inject disinfectant or if you could do something like that, and they say people miss out on the something like that, but it's still, you still got the thing.
Well, I think that the only thing conservatives can possibly say is that some liberals misquoted him, implying that he said you should inject this, when verbatim he didn't say you should. He just said, like, maybe we could do this. I don't know. Either way, it's an unbelievably immature and unprofessional and unpresidential thing to say. I mean, it blows my mind on a daily basis that this guy is the president and this is the stuff that comes out of his mouth. I mean, it's insane. But he said this kind of stuff, and I don't know. I think some people. I mean, there was that one drug that he discussed with no basis, and then that affected the way it was. Hydroxyquinone, or I believe it was called, and this goes to treat lupus. So people with lupus are having a hard time finding the drug. I mean, it's just he just says things to look a certain way, or I just don't know what goes on in his head. But I mean, nobody should be listening to him, in my opinion, about anything, but certainly not about medical advice. I mean, it is just absolutely insane.
Yeah. And one person
consider him a source of information.
One person in chat said that he also was talking about how he was joking about it or something, and I've gone through it a couple of times, and he was not joking about it.
He was trying to appear knowledgeable, which anytime he ever does that is a farce, because he is knowledgeable about precisely nothing, but particularly about science. I mean, this is ridiculous. So.
But one of the things that people have said is they've posted these pictures of this glowing sort of needle in someone's arm, and they claim that it's injecting UV light into the bloodstream to irradiate the blood or something like that. I'm trying to work out how that could ever get rid of coronavirus or anything like that.
Okay, so UV light has no problem getting into your body. So apart from the absurdity of injecting light, it does not need to be injected. It will go right through you, and that is how you get cancer from UV radiation from the sun. That's how you get skin cancer. Is it goes into your body, and it can be ionizing, it can damage your in particular if it damages your DNA, right? It can damage your genes, which messes up gene expression.
I remember something from genetics class in high school. Thymine Dimers is what it's called.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. If you have thymine next to thymine somewhere in the DNA strand, it can cause them to react with one another, form a dimer. This forms a kink in the DNA backbone, which causes problems for replication, for gene expression. There are enzymes that go through the body and recognize it and excise it and fix it. But if you are exposed to a lot of UV light, you get a lot of those, and the enzymes cannot get every single one of them. The body makes mistakes and tries to repair itself, but can't. It's not flawless, so it doesn't catch everything. But it's. I mean. the oh my god, I can't even fathom who could say that or listen to it. I mean, inject light. That's what is being discussed. I mean, it's literal. It's idiocracy, right? It's the Mike Judge movie. Like that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
one person said, to be fair, if you inject disinfectant into your body, you will kill yourself, so you can't have COVID-19. So. That's kind of the idea behind. Have you heard about vitamin B17?
I mean, I'm aware of that vitamin. Yeah. And not anything about it. But.
It's not really a vitamin.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically this thing called amygdalin, which is I think it's in both apple seeds and apricot seeds, and it breaks down into, I think it's benzaldehyde, glucose, and hydrogen cyanide. And that's, I mean, obviously you know that hydrogen cyanide is pretty dangerous.
Yeah, I think benzaldehyde is carcinogenic, I think, as well, to an extent. I thought it was
used in certain food colorings or something like that.
I'm not sure.
Okay. But yeah. But some people have been spouting it as a cure for cancer, and they give all sorts of reasons. I highly recommend...
Yeah. Anyone who says cure for cancer in a sweeping general way has no idea what they're talking about, and doesn't even know what cancer is, honestly.
Yeah. There is one question from chat. Dave, will we have a vaccine for COVID in this year?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know much about the process and the regulations.
Are free radicals involved with this in some way? Are antioxidants helpful or just marketing?
What's this going on now? There's a robot voice.
That was a super chat from Chris Kelling for $5. He asked...
Oh, okay, can you...
Yeah, he asks, are free radicals involved with this in some way, i.e. are antioxidants helpful or just marketing?
I think that there is some value to antioxidants. I mean, obviously, radicals exist and are harmful. Yeah, I mean, I would not go so far as to say that there's no merit to ingesting antioxidants. I think that probably people misrepresent the antioxidant capacity of things to sell them. But that wouldn't be a claim that I would target as being specifically pseudoscientific. I don't think that that's unreasonable to say.
Okay. Yeah, so back to what we were talking about just before that came in. So do you think there'll be a vaccine for coronavirus in this year, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think that, it's about the way these things are regulated, and I unfortunately don't know much about that. I hear a lot of talk of that coming in about 1 year. I don't know if it will be this year. Of course, then we have to deal with the inevitable nuclear fallout of conspiracy theorists insisting that there's a microchip in the vaccine and things of this nature. So I don't know, even at this point, how that will be implemented and what the cultural reaction will be. So it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I'm assuming by now you've seen the TED Talk that Bill Gates did about 5 years ago.
I didn't watch it. I've heard people referencing it. Okay,
so essentially he did a TED Talk 5 years ago saying we're not prepared for the next pandemic, right? And then conspiracy theorists have seen this because it's being recommended on YouTube all of a sudden. Wonder why? Yeah. And has said, basically saying that he planned it and all that. What did you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a pandemic every decade or so. He's not a prophet. I mean, this happens. This has happened through recorded history. Have you heard of the plague? Right, the Black Death, or Spanish flu. I mean, even in very recent history, there's pretty bad ones. And this happens. Science is our way. Science is our defense against pathogens and against these terrible, disasters.
Yeah. Another question I had for you is about the immune system. Do you think? So one of the things that I've heard quite a bit of is the immune system is responsible for a lot of the symptoms of illnesses.
I mean, certain illnesses. I mean, there are autoimmune disorders, which are literally nothing but the immune system attacking your own body. But that's a very small subcategory of disease. It is true that certain symptoms, I mean, like an inflammation is the inflammatory response. That is the activity of the immune system. But I don't think that you could make such a generalization about disease in general. Not to my knowledge, anyway. Yeah.
Well, it's more of when it comes to things like colds. I've heard a lot of people
With
say
pathogens.
that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that there's some validity to that. I don't know much about pathology, but so yeah, I mean that statement is certainly not false. I don't know the degree to which it is true. I mean, there has to be some variability, but yes, I mean, pathogens activate the immune system, so there is immune activity. So yeah, that's I mean, that's part of it. Certainly, yeah.
Like certainly one of the more recent ones I've heard is with coronavirus. One of the ways that it can be quite devastating is that when the immune system goes to attack it, I think the coronavirus infects the immune system, which will send it into overdrive.
I don't know much about that. Yeah, I mean, I think that the main issue is the latency period, right? It's exceptionally long period of time in which symptoms do not develop, which allows us to spread it around, which is the necessity for quarantine, is specifically for that reason, right? Otherwise, we would, right? If it was just the cold, you start to get a cold and you develop symptoms right away and you stay home. Unfortunately, this isn't like that. So that's the necessity for social distancing. As to the exact mechanisms of what it does in the body, I don't really know too much about it.
Okay. Yeah. It's just a few things that I've heard. It's one of the things which I want to try and understand these things better, but there's a lot of different things. And I just see that we've got
and it's hard.
Yeah, I see we've got the resident flat earther in the chat going on about all these different things. Going on about anti-vax and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. But one of the things...
Not much you can do about that.
One of the things that has recently happened, and people are attributing it to different things, is that there has been a drop in pneumonia since coronavirus. Now, the thing that I attribute it to is people getting less diseases in general due to social distancing.
Yeah, I mean, that I had not heard of that, but that's immediately what I think of, right? If we're all quarantined, we're spreading not much of anything to each other. So
yeah. So do you think that we should try and social distance more when we've got things like the flu or the common cold, or do you think it's...
Well, I mean, the common cold, it's nobody dies of the common cold, so the risk factor is very low. Plus, once you get it, you get a runny nose and you get a cough and you stay home from work, and it's just the issue is that the symptoms develop very rapidly for other pathogens in a way that is not the case with this particular strain of coronavirus. So that is that's one of the main aspects that's so dangerous about this particular outbreak. With the flu, I mean, the flu kills a lot. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Answering a question like that, it's hard because I don't really know about economics, and I don't really know. I mean, a lot of people are complaining about wanting quarantine to end because of the devastating effect on the economy, and yeah, it's devastating to the economy. What's more devastating, the businesses shutting down or more people dying? I mean, I don't. You need to be both an economist and an immunologist, a virologist to answer this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's tough. It's tough. But in general, people should take responsibility, and if you're sick, stay home. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there is one of the things that I've recently been looking into, because I've got a friend doing an environmental management course, is acids and bases, because one of their things that they're having trouble with is chemistry. And one of the things that I did recommend is that they go look at your channel, and they said apparently one of their classes or something, they showed some of your videos, so that's...
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of schools use my content for studies.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm trying to understand when it comes to acids and bases, so I know that you can neutralize, like if you have a acid and a base, and you basically have, I think it's roughly the same amount they'll neutralize, right?
If they're of the same strength.
Yeah, if they're all...
Right. You can have a strong base, strong acid, weak acid, strong base, weak base. But if say you have a strong acid and a strong base in equimolar proportions, they will precisely neutralize. Yeah.
Yep. So from what I can tell, a acid will have is it a positive hydrogen ion? Or?
Oh, it can. You can have neutral acids too. It depends on the molecular structure. So the Bronsted-Lowry model, in the Bronsted-Lowry model, an acid is a proton donor. So a hydrogen ion, an H+ ion, is donated from the acid to some base which accepts the proton. So you can have a neutral acid, right? Hydrochloric acid, hydrobromic, hydroiodic, sulfuric. Right? These are neutral. But you can also have hydronium, H3O+. I mean, which would be the generic acid that has a formal positive charge. So that can behave as So it could be neutral, could be positively charged, could even be negatively charged, and still behave as an acid.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm just trying to understand this a bit better. And it seems that the common thing that I find between bases is that they have an OH in them.
Well, so that's the Arrhenius model. I mean, hydroxide is a base, certainly, but you can have all kinds of other bases. A base in the Bronsted-Lowry model is just something that accepts the proton. So you just need a lone pair. You just need a lone pair of electrons. Ammonia is a base, right? NH3 is a base because the lone pair on the nitrogen takes the proton. So that's proton transfer is what defines acid-base reactions.
Okay.
In that model, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I really want to know, because you know how if you put something like sodium into water, it'll do the whole flaring up thing. Mm-hmm. Should it be any different if you were to put sodium into hydrochloric acid?
Well, what is that? I mean, obviously it'll be different because sodium is a very strong electron donor. I don't really know how it would change. You've got a proton source. I don't really know. I'm not sure exactly what would happen.
Because the idea that I came up with a while back was that I may be completely wrong on this, but the way that I thought you'd get the sodium and the chloride sort of binding together to create general table salt, and then you'd have the hydrogen emission or whatever you want to call it. But I might be wrong on that.
It's possible it would evolve hydrogen gas, but I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if that's accurate to say that it would form. That it would react with chlorine in precisely that way. It's not the same, right? Hydrochloric acid is not the same as elemental chlorine gas, right?
Yeah.
We all know that if you take sodium metal and chlorine gas, boom, you get table salt. But HCl is a different species, certainly. I'm not sure. I can't really say confidently what exactly would happen there.
Yeah, because the only thing that the teacher let us do was with some base that had sodium in it, and it formed water and table salt, and that was the closest that they let me do to that experiment. I don't think they wanted me to blow something up. You
gotta be careful with. Sodium is nasty stuff. Sodium is fairly. It's reacts explosively even with water certainly.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I'd like to see would be francium in water, but I doubt I'll ever see that.
There's no point. Let's stick to the elements around us.
Yeah, because I know that francium should be the most reactive of the What are they called again?
The alkali metal.
Yeah, that's it.
Alkali metal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, when it comes to, speaking of acid, deoxyribonucleic acid, why is it called that?
So it's anything that can donate a proton, right, would be considered an acid. So which one is it? I don't know. I think it's the proton on the phosphate ester that would make it an acid.
Okay.
So you have a lot of functional groups on there. But yeah, I mean, I think people have a negative connotation of the word acid, but it just implies proton transfer. That's all it is. So
yeah. And one of the things I always actually found weird was the base, that deoxyribonucleic acid had bases in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that they may not necessarily be actual bases in the chemical sense. Are they? Or
No, they are. Yeah,
Oh, they are.
nitrogenous bases. I mean, nitrogen atoms can act as bases because they have a lone pair, but they don't do any acid-base chemistry, right? The purpose of the bases is to form networks of hydrogen bonding with the opposing strand. That is why DNA is a code, right? The recognition of the appropriate base on the other strand.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll actually get to some of the Patreon questions if you want to answer some questions from those people. I had a few of them up before, but there we go. So we've got Hugh Jarsz, who says, ask him about my top 3 flat Earth killers: lunar eclipse, south celestial pole, observations and measurements of curve. And what would be your top 3? So I think he wants to know what you think about the lunar eclipse, south celestial pole, observations and measurements of curve, and then what would be your 3 top?
Yeah, I think that you are absolutely right that those first 2 are devastating. They're nails in the coffin. I mean, it just can't be explained, and listening to flat earthers try to explain them is hilarious. They invent other objects, a magical other object that we can never detect except during a lunar eclipse that covers the moon, this kind of stuff. And personal celestial domes to explain the opposite rotation of this. So, these are just absolutely ridiculous things. The thing with the third thing is harder because they just lie, right? They just say, oh, I shouldn't be able to see this thing because here's how far away it is, even though it's not. And here's my elevation, even though that's not the elevation. And here's the math I did, which is not the right math. So that's really why that's the only talking point they have left. They all just say, I shouldn't see this thing. That's pretty much all they have left to talk about. My list would probably, it would include lunar eclipse. I think just the sheer aspect of sunrise and sunset with a sun that does not change in angular size and comes up the horizon, goes down the other, clearly because we are turning. And then I actually just put out one a couple weeks ago about the moon. I got tired of talking about science to flat earthers, so I did one that involves no science at all, and it was simply that we all see the exact same face of the moon. And so I tried to show the moon on the flat plane of their Earth and have the moon going around in little circles. Can everyone see the same face of the moon if it's doing that? No, they cannot. Not if it's a sphere. If it's a spotlight, it would change apparent size as it goes around. I just tried to show the moon in any way that you could imagine the moon would be over a flat plane, and there is no way that everyone on Earth can see the exact same face of the moon. The reason we see the exact same face of the moon is because Earth is a sphere, the moon is going around us, and it's tidally locked with the same face always facing us. So this is the kind of thing, this is one of at least a dozen ways that the ancient Greeks and earlier figured out that the Earth is round. They did not know anything about the physics that we know or space. They did not know what planets were. They did not know what the sun was. They did not know what the moon is. They did not know what stars are. They still had astrology, for crying out loud. They believed in astrology, and yet they knew the Earth was round. I mean, this is how unbelievably basic and logic-based this is. So the moon thing, lunar eclipses, sunrise, sunset, although celestial dome observations, I agree, those would be my 4 probably of just undeniable The Earth is round. Get over it. We're all kind of tired of this ridiculous hoax at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a few things that you brought up there. When it comes to the moon, I've actually taken observation of the moon. In fact, I can actually see the moon right now. It's not quite a full moon. But one of the observations I took of the moon was I had this ball that I was just passing by on the street one day. I was like, actually, I'm just going to take a photo of the moon because I saw the moon up in the sky, and I made sure to line the ball up with the moon, and you could see that it was lit in pretty much the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that that's a good flat Earth killer as well.
Sure. I mean, the list is you could fill an encyclopedia. I mean, it's a long list.
Yeah.
The existence of gravity, I would actually add to that list. That gravity exists alone. The Earth is not flat.
Right? But another thing,
crushed into a ball.
Yeah, another thing you brought up was astrology, and I've actually there was a surprising amount of people that disagreed with me when I took on astrology on Cy Mandan's channel. Although I think more people were annoyed that I didn't address the last 3 signs because they wanted to know what their signs were. I actually I did completely skip over Virgo for a joke though.
What's the joke?
Well, essentially the video that I was responding to said Virgo the Virgin, and I just went no comment.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I get it.
So yeah, I like having a whole lot of jokes when I respond to videos. So yeah, but I'm surprised at how many people were annoyed at that. People would often claim that. Well, some people said I wasn't actually properly responding to astrology because it's deeper than just sun signs. What would you say about that?
I mean, you can dress it up however you want. You can say it's this, you can say it's that. There's no correlation, period. I did a very lengthy debunk of astrology on my channel, which I encourage anyone to check it out. It's like 18 minutes long and says everything that I could possibly say, both from the standpoint of there being absolutely no physical mechanism whatsoever by which these objects could influence things on Earth, especially things as subtle as disposition and personality and things like that, apart from the sun and the moon, which exert gravitational influence on us, obviously, but gravity's not going to make you sassy. And the abject and utter failure of every study that has ever tried to demonstrate any correlation with any aspect of natal charts, star signs, horoscopes, or anything like that to any real people or things. So that's really all there is to it. I typically don't go out of my way to go at it with astrologers because I'm focused more on things that actually harm society in a direct physical way. But if you're asking my opinion, no, astrology has zero validity. It is a relic of an ancient time when we thought the Earth was the center of the universe, and that planets were literal gods, having little dramas in the sky, and we played connect the dots with constellations to pretend that the stars care who we are, and they don't. So yeah. That's really all.
I think that's a good way of putting it. You did say something about going after things that are harmful. Are you going to go after anti-vaxxers at any point?
Yeah, I mean, I had always intended to. Originally, what I was doing is I was grounding my debunks in the context of a relatively curriculum-aligned playlist. So I did an astronomy playlist where I went through Astronomy 101 learning objectives. And then at the end, for fun, I threw in my astrology debunk and my flat Earth debunk. And that flat Earth debunk was the thing that the Globebusters did their thing, and then I annihilated them. And that is what got me into what I'm doing now. And so lately I've been doing a handful of debunks just because I'm quarantined and I can't get over to YouTube Studios to film my regular content. So I've been thinking about what I can do at home. That's why I did the Electric Universe one. And I always wanted to do anti-vax stuff too, but I wanted to ground it in an immunology series. And luckily, I just found somebody to write the immunology content for me, and we will collaborate on the anti-vax debunk in that playlist, because I really want, like, when I talk about something, when I will be talking about anti-vax stuff, I don't really want to do what everyone does and just kind of, this is wrong and this is dumb and blah, blah, blah. Like, I want to refer back to the knowledge that is imparted previously in the immunology series, right? I want to talk about, with some modicum of depth, how the immune system works. So hiring an immunologist to write all about it and then working together on how that debunk is going to go, I feel will be maybe more effective, maybe not. I don't know what it'll be with. So definitely within, hopefully this year at some point, that series will be coming out, and I will do that. But yeah, there's just so much stuff. I don't know. I mean, it depends how long quarantine lasts, because I don't have much else to do here but some of these debunks and these conversations. So I will probably do a couple more. I haven't decided exactly which ones yet, but I've been discouraged a little bit. I mean, I don't like the inflammatory response I've been getting, and these email threats, literally, that I've been getting.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know how to navigate it, but we'll see what happens. I don't know.
AB Science is actually in the chat, and he was one of, because you said that you had gotten response from a lot of Electric Universe guys. I'm actually wondering if AB Science has gotten like a like death threats or stuff, because it's been death threats that you've been getting, right?
No, not death threats.
Oh, not death threats, just
threats of harassment, not violence, but people are going to show up at my house if I, basically a larger channel, started emailing me unprovoked, even though what I was debunking really has very little to do with what his channel is about. Insisted that I would debate him. I refused. He began to threaten me. He sent his minions to harass me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, which they did mindlessly. And now he is alluding to, people can find you where you live, and they're going to come, and this has happened before, and they're going to come get you and stuff like that. And it's ridiculous. It's petty. It's childish. I was not threatening his channel whatsoever. And, I'm pretty sure I'm going to respond. But it's unnerving to get these kinds of things. You want to debate me, and you're gonna yell at me and threaten me, and that's how I'm gonna debate. I mean, this is ridiculous. Yeah. This person is not even a scientist. And furthermore, I was not debunking anything that he represents. It's tangential. It's completely tangential. He could have distanced himself. He could have said, yeah, that's a thing that I also don't believe, so it's fine. But these people, this is really, I mean, I'm hitting a chord here, I think, with some of these debunks. I'm striking something, and it's scaring me a little bit. But I mean, what am I going to do? This is kind of my thing. It's something I really want to do. So I guess I got to keep doing it. I don't know.
Like sometimes people will comment negative stuff on my channel, and I just, like, sometimes I ignore it, but sometimes it's like, I'm going to just keep that for later so I can read it out in a funny voice. And although people do get annoyed when I
document everything.
Yeah, one person got annoyed when one person, because I sometimes let my patrons read it out and read out comments. One person got annoyed that one of my patrons read it out with a sort of hillbilly accent or a Southern Hick accent, and so yeah. But AB Science did say that he has received no death threats, just a bit of abuse, but the abuse is just funny.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I think that he's just puffing up his chest, but I don't know. I mean, we'll see.
So one person says, invite Gary Wabinga to ask a question to Dave. And then Gary actually said in the comments, why would I ask a question just to hear a standard response that I've heard so many times from your network? So I guess that's I guess we can...
What's the question? About what? About what are we even talking about here?
Yeah, so do you think that's a sort of unwillingness to learn or an unwillingness to sort of listen to the other side there, or?
Well, probably, but I could have a better idea if I even knew what he was talking about. What is the topic?
I don't know, maybe he wanted to, maybe he was thinking, I can ask a question about how the Earth is flat, and I'll just get the same response that I've always heard. So yeah,
because the Earth ain't flat. I mean, come on. I mean, flat. It's like if you want to talk about the origin of coronavirus or something, that there is at least something to talk about. You know what I mean? We can talk about that kind of stuff. But flat Earth. I mean, give me a break. This is like, it's not flat. Like, period. Stop it. Move on. Like, what are you doing? Like, pick something else that you can have any hope of uncovering anything remotely legitimate. You know what I mean? Flat Earth is the laughing stock of internet hoaxes. It's the dumbest one by a mile. You pick something else to be conspiratorial about.
One person did say about some of the flat earthers. For example, you got one flat earther called JM Truth, and some people say that one of the reasons why he's probably in the whole flat earth thing is he's hoping to discover something about discover something that no one else has discovered, and actually partaking in science is too hard to be able to do that.
Well, flat earthers have no idea what science is or how to do it, so I don't know why they would think that they have a valid opinion on that. I got into flat earth debunking because Globebusters did a live stream mocking me relentlessly and taunting me, and I'm vindictive. So I made a response video annihilating them, and that's how this started. The funny thing is, if they had just done a live stream saying, well, he says this, but he's wrong, and here's why, then I would have said, well, that's dumb and I don't care. But the degree to which they mocked me was so infuriating that, I mean, come on, what are you going to do? I mean, it's the same with this guy who's slandering me now and threatening me with the electric universe. I mean, I wasn't calling him out. I wasn't talking to him at all or anything he talks about. But if you're going to slander me and threaten me, I mean, I'm not a pushover. I'm going to respond to you. This is ridiculous that you would talk to me or about me this way. I don't go, I'm not barging into an astrologer's office and going, this is dumb, you need to get out of here, it's so stupid. I mean, no, you don't. Look, I think that what you're doing is dumb, but you didn't ask me, and I'm not going to go bother you. This is my response. Is when I have these responses, it is reserved for people who taunt and slander me. That is where these come from, and that flat Earth one is how this all got started. This is, I didn't choose flat Earth. Flat Earth chose me. That's how this happened. So
yeah, AB Science wants to know who is the electric universe guy.
It's Suspicious Observers. He's got this channel and he talks about all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And he's been sending me emails, so I'm going to respond. I'm going to post it on within a couple of days probably. Okay. But so look out for that. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll actually go to one of the other Patreon questions. Stuart Tamanaha asks, how about proofs that don't take a rocket scientist to do it? I'm thinking he's talking about proofs about why the Earth is a globe.
Yeah, all the ones that we said, the sunrise and sunset, and the thing about the moon, and the thing that gravity exists. I mean, these are very basic. You don't need science to prove the Earth is round. You don't even need to know what space is or what any of the things in space are. You don't need pictures of the Earth from space, which we have, but they say are fake for no reason. You don't need any of these things, right? It's very basic, very obvious observation and logic-based analysis that tells us the Earth is round, which is why we've known it's round for 2,500, 3,000 years, something along those lines.
Yeah. And then there's also Holmes, who says, the school children I meet during my astronomy outreach work are incredibly knowledgeable on all things scientific. Science education has never been better. I'd love to ask Professor Dave what causes people in a world filled with great science education resources to seem to believe in crazy stuff.
I mean, it's hard. I mean, globally, every country has a different educational system, and I can't speak to other countries. I think that other countries probably have a grasp on it a bit better than America does. There's a lot of problems with America's educational system, so that's part one. But part two is this narrative that I was describing towards the beginning of our discussion. It is the tendency of a person to want to believe that all of science is wrong, so that I don't have to learn it, or it's basically an anti-establishment narrative, right? Which unfortunately we do have to blame the government for to some extent, because if the government had not, if the government and the corporatocracy had not done some of the things they did from the 1950s on, then anti-establishment sentiment would not exist in the first place. But it's taking this. You see it everywhere with anti-vax, anti-Western medicine, flat Earth. All of these things are just big bad thing is bad, whether it's big government or big business or big science or big whatever it is bad. And this little rebel person is good and true. That's the narrative. And it's not inherently a ridiculous narrative unless you just identify with that narrative and turn it into your own personal identity, and then just paint it on everything you see. Vaccines are bad, and the Earth is flat, by the way, and you know, the gravity is electromagnetism. All these ridiculous things are just manifestations of this anti-establishment sentiment, which, you know, again, there's a reason that we fear the establishment, but you can't just call science the establishment, right? Scientific reasoning has nothing to do with governments. It's just we look at stuff and figure it out, and that's how we know things. So I think that's kind of the core of it, but I can't speak towards every individual that becomes conspiratorial. I don't know what drives these people.
I do have to say that what you're saying sounds suspiciously similar to what AB Science is saying. I might... about or what AB Science has said about it. Might be because you're both rather educated in science, or it might be because you're both the same person. Look, I haven't seen you two in a room together.
I am every science communicator.
But yeah, the sentiment does seem to be shared. One of the things that you did bring up is about the way that education is done. So, what things do you think should be changed about education to get a sort of smarter population?
I mean, put money into it. I mean, stop taking money out of education and putting it into defense. Right? We need to pay teachers legitimately. Right? I can solve this in one fell swoop. Every public school teacher makes $90,000 a year. Done. What are you going to get? Really good teachers that want to earn a decent living. I mean, that's all there is to it. Just pay teachers properly. You'll get good teachers that are really invested in their classroom. Pay for them to get the education they have. I did a science education master's degree, and the degree to which it was applicable to science communication was existent but somewhat tangential, whereas the rest of the cohort were high school science teachers, and they learned all of these incredible tools that they could use in the platform in their classroom to expand what they do, utilize technology, really great stuff that they learned in that program that I was in. Pay for teachers to subsidize the education of teachers to learn effective ways to teach in the classroom. Right? We need young people to not fear science. Right? They need to know what science is and familiarize themselves with it, so that they don't fall for this. For these narratives, right? These anti-science narratives, which is quite frankly precisely what they are. They're not anti-establishment. They become anti-science specifically. That's a big problem.
Yeah. I've actually, one of the interesting things that I've found is that there are some places in New Zealand that I know of that pay the teachers, I think it's about $40 an hour or something like that. The problem is that that's only $40 for each hour that you're actually teaching. That doesn't include when you're marking things. So I'm just wondering, do you think that would work? I'm not sure. That's probably something like $30 an hour in America.
I don't know. I mean, I know that there are technological solutions to all of the additional work that teachers have to do. For example, using technology, using web-based applications like Google Sheets and Google Docs and Google Forms to sort of automate a lot of the processes involved with correcting assignments and things like that. So that's part of the stuff that my cohort was taught. But I'm not going to pretend that I understand the large-scale legislation, nor do I understand the global economy. All I'm saying is pay teachers more. Right? I don't know how much. Just pay them more. You know what I mean? That's it. So,
do you think, because AB Science said maybe increasing the amount of teachers out there, do you think that would be something that could also work?
I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know current statistics on teacher to student ratios or anything like that. I know. I mean, I'm sure it varies from community to community. But I mean, look, the answer is it's money. It's always money, right? Just more money. Make large corporations pay their fair share of taxes. Make Amazon pay taxes. Stop funneling all of this money into defense, right? Just let's be a democracy. If we're going to say, I mean, sorry, I'm an American, so I'm talking about America, but just any democratic nation should uphold to the definition of a democracy and take care of its constituents, right, and provide them with education and healthcare and all these things that a democratic nation is supposed to do, so that everybody can be empowered to become the best thing that they can be. That's the point. And there's a lot of propaganda that goes around that pretends that's not what a democracy is supposed to do, or that any attempt to try to get that is socialism. And this is no, it's like this is what a democracy is. This is absurd.
Yeah, but I will agree that whenever someone says, "Oh, this is socialism," it becomes really, that they're being
anyone
ridiculous.
Who says that has to define socialism. Actually, it was a great moment. It was one of my favorite moments when I was talking with Jesse towards the end of our discussion. He went on about socialism, and I said, "Define socialism," and he refused. And then one of the Q&A participants asked him to define socialism, and he went on to ramble about ridiculous things when everything that is not a form of government, which is what socialism is. And I made sure to point that to him.
That is funny though, because a lot of people that I've heard of do try and say that socialism is basically authoritarian government or something. And so it's funny that because I don't exactly remember when he said that. I kind of do, but at the same time,
no, he has no clue what it is. I mean, I'm not an authority. I'm not a political theorist. I can't write an essay on socialism, but I could at least go to Google and look up the definition of it before I start talking about it. I mean, this is the level of intellect with some of these people that we're dealing with. You should look up what words mean before you try to use them in a sentence, is something that I try to tell people. You know what I mean? Know what the words mean that you are saying, because other people, I know that some people don't, but other people do, and they will judge you according to how well you use words, So
yeah. Do you think it would be better to talk about policy rather than ideology?
Well, I mean, both are important.
Well, when
I know very little about policy, so there's not much I can say about it. But I mean, ideology drives policy, so you need both, right? A nation needs to agree on what it wants to do, and then it has to decide how it wants to do it. So, I mean, they're both very important things to discuss. Yeah.
Well, what I mean is usually, because I hear a lot of people saying things like, we need a socialist government, or we need we need this type of government, we need a conservative government or something like that. And when it comes to different people, like different people have a different idea of what socialism means. Some people have different idea of what is liberal and what is conservative. And then you've got people that have all sorts of socialist or even conservative definitions, and they might be neoliberal social. It might be something like. I'm just going to make something up that will seem a little bit ridiculous, but neoliberal socialist syndicist ANCAP or something, and it's like really super narrowly defined, and you could probably get a whole lot of policies out of that, but I think my general position is that it's better to talk about particular policies that you want to implement and what the goal of that policy is in order to achieve maybe a particular...
Yeah. I mean, if you have a particular ideology you want to espouse, you can refer to terminology that exists that describes those ideas to sort of ground it in a larger conversation. But obviously you don't even have to, right? When I'm saying give teachers more money, I just think that we should give teachers more money, right? If I was a political scientist or an economist, I could ground that in a lot of terminology, but I'm not, and I'm familiar with the terminology, but I'm not about to go throwing around a bunch of rhetoric, because it's not something that I know a lot about, but I just think that we should give teachers more money. So that's the ideological part. The policy is, okay, where do you get the money? All right, let's take this from defense, or let's collect, that too I don't know much about, but I can guarantee you we could find it if we actually valued education, which is an ideological discussion, right? What do we want to do as a country? So yeah, unfortunately, I can't say too much more than that. This is, I stick to science and music. That's about it.
I think that one of the things that I'm going to take from this is give teachers more money.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of teachers, and look, they don't make good money. It's a problem. So.
One of the issues that I actually know that's happening in New Zealand is the problem with the way that, and this may have been changed by now, I'm not sure, but the way that education is set up, at least in high school, is there's this thing called NCEA, and I know that the schools that do better in NCEA get more funding, and whereas the schools that don't do as well in it get less funding. So would you say... I personally think that this is problematic. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, at face value, I would agree with you. I mean, I would have to, I don't know. That's a heady one. I mean, I would have to look at data. I would want to hear. Here's what I would say. I would want to hear opposing arguments about that and weigh them critically. Upon you saying that, I think I would tend to agree with you that's problematic.
I think the argument... I was just going to say, I think the argument is more, trying to motivate teachers to work towards, to make the students as good as possible to get the highest grades. Therefore, they'll get paid more, kind of thing. Like how you sort of say, I say to someone working for a company, if you work hard, you'll get a raise, kind of thing.
Yeah. But you're in the process penalizing underprivileged students through no fault of their own. So why not just pay all teachers more? Then they are all motivated more to keep that job, because it's a good... If you see, the problem is teaching jobs don't pay well, so they're not saturated. We want the field of education to be saturated with qualified or even overqualified teachers. Right? What would it be like if people with advanced degrees were teaching in a middle school? You know what I mean? Imagine if somebody with a PhD was teaching in a middle school. I mean, this would be pretty different. But instead, because it's so undervalued and so underpaid, right? You have a disparity in teaching ability in terms of people who come to the field. So if it was a really, really solid salary, now you've got a really desirable job. Now you've got a competitive situation where people want to be teachers. And there's maybe not even enough jobs for all the people who want to be teachers and would be really good teachers. So again, I'm not really an authority in this field, but it seems pretty clear to me that would be a good course of action. But I'm open to any counterpoint anyone would have to bring up about it.
What do you think about retraining some teachers? Because I know that when I was in high school, a lot of things that I learned, especially in IT, which is one of my more specialty things, a lot of the stuff I learned was mostly me trying to understand the papers. Of course, I did learn a bit from the teachers themselves, but for a lot of it, I was actually learning from the sort of learning from reading stuff on the internet, learning from experimentation, because that's one of the big things that helps you in IT. Is just playing with different things to work out how it'll work. So, what would you say about possibly retraining certain teachers to be able to get them up to a higher standard?
Yeah, training would be great. I mean, subsidize it, right? Pay for it, and then offer an incentive. If you complete this master's program, you get this raise, right? Things like that. Because I mean, self-learning is great, and I applaud anyone who takes it upon themselves to self-learn, but the incentive isn't there, right? It has to come from within, and you also lack the structure of somebody guiding you through the learning process, and then also the accountability of assignments and exams and things of that nature that demonstrate that you have gained the knowledge. But I think that the people that were in my cohort for the science education masters, I think that they learned a tremendous amount to bring back to the classroom and transform their classroom into a somewhat more cutting edge sort of a situation, aligned to newer standards, using certain technology, and I think that those programs should be paid for, and the incentive for teachers to engage in them would be a raise at their job. If you have this additional degree, you are therefore more qualified, and you get a higher rate of pay. Yes, training would be great. I agree.
Yeah. I was just looking at the chat there to see if there's anything new. Gary's still rambling, but one thing I did find interesting is someone said, that's what happens here due to a lack of job opportunities. We have PhDs driving cabs. So I think that's the whole argument that you go on about for raising the wage of teachers. If it's better for...
Oh, you think that would have an adverse effect in that? Is that a counter argument? Or
No. That's actually supporting your argument for raising wages.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, if a PhD is driving if a PhD would get paid more from teaching rather than driving a cab, then
right. Yeah. I mean, let's value our culture, at least American culture. I don't think we value knowledge and expertise appropriately. I mean, we're seeing the death of expertise right in front of our faces as people begin to lend more credibility to conspiratorial crackpots on whatever social media platform they find, just because of confirmation bias. Whatever happened to, hey, I have a PhD in virology, so I know about viruses specifically. That's the thing I know about, right? I mean, listen to the people who study the thing. I mean, people who peddle a conspiratorial narrative, they couldn't even tell you 5 facts about a virus. It's like, this is... the disparity is in expertise is a chasm, and I don't. It's really hard for me to wrap my head around people who don't trust experts. I can't fathom it. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's always baffles me when people. Well, it doesn't really baffle me. I kind of understand it, but when people go out and say, there's a particular example, but they'll say, they might say something like, name 5 things that are in vaccines. And these are the anti-vaxxers that'll say it. They'll say something like, name 5 things that are in vaccines, bet you can't. And it's like, well, yeah, most people aren't going to know what's in vaccines. Like, even some specialists or even some doctors may not know what's in vaccines, but they'll still say, oh, name 5 things that are in vaccines, bet you can't. It's like, but it doesn't.
And whoever you got your answer from was lying. So there you go. You know?
Yeah. I've actually got one person wanting me to ask you if you think that creationism should be taught in public schools.
No, of course not. Separation of church and state. Do not teach religion in schools. If you want to go to a church and hear somebody talk about something at a church, then that's your prerogative. And you can have a religion if you wish. That is, you are free to, in America, certainly, you can have a religion and do that. Public schools, no, absolutely not.
Do you think that science should be taught more about how to arrive at certain answers?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the degree to which some schools do that. I think some do. I mean, I know science teachers that do try to infuse that, but certainly, I don't think that may be the norm across the board. But yeah, I think that infusing a little bit of a historical perspective, certainly in chemistry and in physics, these kinds of fields, knowing how we figured things out. I will say that there are certain aspects of that are part of any curriculum, right? Anytime you learn about atomic theory in chemistry, you learn about John Dalton, you learn about J.J. Thomson, you learn about Rutherford, everybody learns about these things. So there's some aspect where it's there. But yeah, you can always have more. We want to humanize science, right? We don't want science classes to be what pseudoscientific peddlers say it is, where you just sit there and mindlessly learn facts and regurgitate them. That's what people want others to believe that learning science is. It isn't. Not even in high school. Even in high school, you do experiments. In physics in high school, you do experiments to prove to yourself that Newton's laws of motion are true. Right? You do stuff with a block and a pulley and whatever, and you write numbers down and you go, okay, this equation models the stuff that I just saw. And in college, give me a break. I mean, you're doing chemistry experiments, you're doing chemistry, and then graduate school, you are a scientist at that point. I mean, so you can't start soon enough. Even in elementary school, I think we could probably be doing some of that, but once again, I think a lot are, or hopefully they are, but I'm for it. I would say,
yeah, because I do know that sometimes it does. At least sometimes it feels like you're just there to memorize what you need to learn for maybe a test or maybe a assignment, rather than actually learning, okay, how do I arrive at the answers that everyone else has? Because one of the big things that I'd love to know how to do is to actually measure the distances to stars, especially stars in the galaxy, and that'd be something very interesting to look into, I think.
That's what this is.
One. What star is it to?
Parsec. Oh no, it's just to any point in space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the parallax method. That's how we find out how far away things are.
Yeah.
I can elaborate if I don't have to though.
If you want to, you can elaborate, because I'm very interested.
Well, just in 30 seconds or so. You ever play this game? Camera 1, camera 2, camera 1, camera 2. You know that thing?
Oh yeah.
So whatever you're looking at shifts when you do that, right?
Yeah.
It's because of the distance between your eyes. So imagine that this eye is when the Earth is on one side of the Earth, or the Earth is on one side of the sun. Imagine this eye is when the Earth is on the other side of the sun. We measure an angular difference in the apparent position of a star. You can measure that angle. It's a very, very tiny angle, which is why we were not able to detect these angles until I don't know, early 20th century, maybe late 19th century. You can measure that angle, and then you can do trigonometry because we know the distance from the Earth to the sun, and you can get the distance to the object that way, trigonometry.
Okay, I might look into attempting that at some point. And AB Science says, okay, Dave's tattoo is evidence that he is the king of the nerds.
I'll take that. Yeah, nerd. I identify as a nerd, not a geek. So we get nerd is accurate.
Yeah, I do prefer nerd to geek, honestly.
I just think that we need to be clear as a society in what they mean. Nerd is somebody that is academically oriented, which I certainly am, whereas geek is more about comic books and superhero stuff, and I don't care about any of that whatsoever. So I don't do that.
Fair enough. One of the things that would be interesting for though also is because another method of working out how far away something is redshift.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's more for galaxies.
Yeah, because I know that there was one person who actually worked out how far, or roughly how big or how old the universe is using the distance to one of the furthest galaxies that's ever been observed, which is something like 13 billion light years away. And then,
Hubble's law, right? Hubble's law is what you're describing, where we correlate the recession velocity of a galaxy by its redshift. So it's just we're looking at the expansion of the universe. We're sort of measuring the rate of expansion of the universe to then play the movie backwards and figure out when it was a singularity. And that has been refined over time as only one of the methods we use to come up with this figure of 13.7, 13.8 billion years as the age of the universe. But yeah, astronomy is wild.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually curious. What do you think has been the most misunderstood scientific thing that's been used by peddlers of pseudoscience?
Quantum mechanics.
Quantum mechanics? Okay.
So there is an entire field of pseudoscience called quantum mysticism. And so this is where you get Reiki and quantum healing. It's where you get Deepak Chopra. That's where you get all of these people that say that quantum physics is confusing, therefore it's magic. So if you can explain magic in the terminology of quantum physics, it's real. And so they will use this methodology to peddle philosophies and products under the guise of the notion that in the early 20th century, science figured out that the universe is magic, basically, which it's not. It's just hard to understand quantum physics is all it is.
Yeah, I think someone earlier on said, had a quote by Richard Feynman, or it might have been someone else, someone just, they just put it in the chat again. If anyone says they understand quantum mechanics, they're either lying or a fraud. Richard Feynman.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think it's maybe a bit hyperbolic because, the people who study it understand it to some degree, but truly, I mean, I don't understand it. I can talk about it on a conceptual level more easily than others, than other non-physicists. But no, I don't really understand it because I don't really understand the math. I have a tenuous grasp on the math behind it, and that's all it is math. Right? It's mathematical formulations to describe very small systems, and all of this magic that has been put upon it is just to sell you stuff.
Have you ever heard of Wisdom of Chopra?
I mean, I know of Deepak Chopra. I don't know about. Oh wait, are you talking about the generator that makes the some stuff that he would say?
Yeah, like I just put it in there, and
awesome, by the way.
It says
indistinguishable.
Yeah, infinity is only possible in reckless force fields.
Yeah.
There's also
I do know that it's wonderful thing that somebody created.
AB Science actually took that. Somewhat took that idea and applied it to Ken Wheeler, the Electric Universe guy, and essentially created things that Ken Wheeler would say, and it's like there was one point at which he said it in the video, and I was like, this is, and I was thinking immediately. I thought that can't be something that AB Science would actually say. This has to be. And then yes, AB Science said, "Oh, that was generated by I think it was Botnik."
Huh.
Yeah, that's something that can basically generate AI things. But on the topic of things that I think are vastly misunderstood. There's always the Big Bang, which is always misunderstood by creationists that basically say it was an explosion. And all the as Ken Tovin would put it, all the kangaroos came from a dot. And...
I mean, yeah, if you want to go back far enough, yeah. They sure did, Kent. So...
Yeah. But then...
that's just an over-reduction of 5 different scientific fields that he has no clue about.
Yeah,
so.
But then there's also the second law of thermodynamics, which I think is the most misused, one of the most misused applications of science. Like I've even
it's up there
for flat earthers. I've termed it for flat earthers. I've termed it. Oh, sorry.
I lost your audio there for a second.
I coughed because, and so I muted myself when I coughed. Didn't want it to be picked up.
Got it.
But yeah, the second law I call the second law of thermodynamics when flat earthers talk about it. The second law of thermodynamics. So, have you?
No, they can't even define the law. It's a joke.
Yeah, they always talk about it being gas pressure can't exist next to a vacuum, but the important thing is entropy rather than any kind of thing like gas pressure.
Yeah, what they're trying to do is say that the second law implies, well, not implies, the second law describes dispersal of matter and energy, right? So things spread out. So how can gas spread out? Why isn't gas spreading out into space? Well, because there is a force pulling it down to Earth. Right? It's as simple as that. But I mean, that's the end of that story. But it's not just that. I mean, people use the second law to imply that abiogenesis or the development of life is impossible. But again, this is ridiculous because if you actually understood that law and if you actually understood entropy and spontaneity, right? If we want to talk about spontaneity, you have to talk about the Gibbs free energy equation. Talking about delta G equals delta H minus T delta S. So you've got enthalpy and you've got entropy. So what happens when you take so soap, right? Soap works because you've got soap molecules that form these ordered structures called micelles with the polar heads facing out to interact with water and the non-polar tails facing in to hide away from water. It's called the hydrophobic effect. So you've got these little spherical things that form spontaneously. Why are they able to do that? Because when they do that, they form electrostatic interactions that bring the system to a lower energy. That energy is released into the universe, and so the entropy of the universe increases. So the second law of thermodynamics says that the entropy of the universe increases for any spontaneous process. So it does not say that local order cannot form. Of course, when water freezes to form ice, that's spontaneous order. Obviously, order happens spontaneously. The point is that when ice forms, they make the hydrogen bonds. Energy is released. So energy is dispersed. So there is no problem with localized order happening spontaneously, and in fact, we see it every day. So it's just nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the ways that I've always thought about describing it is with chemical reactions. And I think I basically think of it this way. If you've got a chemical reaction, just say you've got a hydrogen atom bonding to two hydrogen atoms bonding to an oxygen atom. You could say that results in what we perceive to be more order, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's violating the second law of thermodynamics. In fact, if you tried to use that as an example of it violating the second law of thermodynamics, you've basically got to admit that, Well, you're basically trying to state that the entire field of chemistry is fake.
Yeah, and not just one water molecule. How about water molecules making a little ring and then organizing into an elaborate, perfectly symmetrical lattice structure when water freezes, which happens every day? I mean, no, there's very little. I mean, spontaneity, again, depends on enthalpy and entropy. So enthalpy is energy. If something releases energy as a process, it's enthalpically favorable. And then entropy has to do with dispersal of matter and energy. So these are two factors. Something can be entropically unfavorable, meaning order is formed, as long as it is enthalpically favorable, meaning it releases energy, which all of these processes do. And all of the processes that led to the development of life, or abiogenesis, are clearly energy releasing processes, as they are in our bodies too, currently. But abiogenesis is a pretty heady field, which would take a lot of time to get into. But thermodynamics has nothing to do with it. No way. Yeah.
As far as I understand abiogenesis is, it's scientists in a lab trying to recreate early Earth conditions and seeing if they can get things like proteins or the mechanisms for life to be able to start forming. And I know that a lot of creationists like to point to it, saying, "Aha, you haven't made life in a lab like this yet, so it can't form." And it's like, well, we've only been in a lab how long? 100 years at most.
There's so many ways to talk about this. That was one of my favorite moments with Kent, is his blatant moving of the goalposts, where he said, you can't create it in a lab. And then when I talked about lab stuff, he said, see, it takes an intelligent creator. It's like, oh, wow, like the transparency with which you just said a thing and then move the goalposts is unthinkable. But I mean, look, you can't create it in a lab, or why aren't we seeing it in nature? Look, life exists on Earth. How are biological materials going to self-assemble into some structure, a process that took probably 500 million years? How is that going to happen in a visible time span on a planet where biological life already exists that consumes biological molecules, that consumes biological material? You know what I mean? It's like you cannot, it's just the whole approach with which they try to discredit it is invalid. And it's not surprising because they have no ability to discuss the actual biochemistry. Right? If they wanted, they could learn biochemistry and they could try to poke holes in the experiments that have been done to show the various steps along the way, the formulation of basic organic materials, the polymerization of those into biomolecules, the self-assembly into protobionts and then protocells. They could try to poke holes in that, but what are they going to? They're going to learn biochemistry to continue to be creationists. If they did, they wouldn't be creationists. So they don't learn science. They just I don't even know what you would call it, what they do, but it's not science,
Yeah. One person did just say in the chat, must say, Knight, thanks Planartalk and Professor Dave for a very interesting debate. And I don't think this has been a debate. I mean,
there's a discussion.
Who won this debate?
I mean, in fact, most of the things that we call debates are not debates. I mean, the only thing that you can debate is something that has two valid viewpoints. So, like I think next month or so, there is a theist that reached out that wanted to have a debate with me about theism, and he's a very intelligent, cordial guy. And I looked at some of his stuff and I said, this is great. I would love to debate this with you because I am an atheist and you're a theist, and we will have a proper debate discussing two reasonable viewpoints, because theism on its own is a perfectly reasonable viewpoint when you don't add all of the creationist young Earth creationism nonsense and stuff on top. That will be a debate. What I did with Kent was not a debate. What I did with Jesse was, I don't even know what that was. when one side is right and the other is wrong, it's not a debate. It's one person trying to explain facts to the other side. That's not a debate, as much as certain people would want to interpret it the other way.
You could call it an attempt to educate a petulant child.
Yes, yeah, that's a pretty accurate description. Yeah.
Yeah. one person said you can tell that Dave is a professor because Planet Walk just yawned in. I will admit that I did yawn, but it's because I barely got any sleep last night. And one person just sent in a super chat, KDoc for 5.
Debate Darth Dawkins. This will be interesting.
What about Dawkins?
Darth Dawkins.
Darth? Oh, okay.
Do you know who that is?
No, I don't. I just heard Dawkins.
Okay, yeah. So Darth Dawkins is a creationist person, or not so much. I don't think he's like a creationist or a young Earth creationist. He's a theist at least, and he tries to wrap up a lot of this. He tries to wrap up a lot of what he says in philosophy by saying that you need some sort of instantiator for things like logic.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, look, that's a debate-worthy claim. You know what I mean? I'm not, philosophy. If you want to talk about what caused the beginning of the universe, look, this is, science does not have a firm answer for this. So that is grounds for debate. Yeah, and you can go deep into esoteric philosophical territory if you want. And it's going to be. I'm looking forward to that debate because I think it's going to be interesting, and maybe I'll even learn something. As opposed to me trying to explain to flat earthers that the Earth absolutely, factually, without a doubt, is not flat. You know what I mean? This is they're categorically different things. The latter does not qualify as a debate by any stretch of the. Usually debates are on like what kind of government should we have and what kind of policies should we have, things that are uncertain. Human creation, right? Should we implement this kind of technology? Is it ethical? That kind of stuff. That's a debate because we don't know. We haven't done it yet. We're not sure what's going to happen. And what do you think we should do? It's not about obvious physical facts that we can see that are not up for discussion whatsoever. You know what I mean? Those are not debates. It's not debatable. You can't debate something that's not debatable. So
one person. Oh no, not one person. One thing that I've seen that sort of shows what debates between people that have a very deep sort of... take Ken Ham, for example, right? Ken Ham has a really deep religious... what would be a good... I'm trying to think of a word to describe it. Oh, he's deeply...
Worldview.
Yeah, he's got a deeply religious worldview. And one thing that happened in the debate between him and Bill Nye, and you'd probably be able to say that wasn't really a debate, because at one point they were each asked, what would change your mind? And Bill Nye said if there was one small of...
evidence.
Yeah, one small bit of evidence, then you'd be able to change,
Any
Bill Nye...
evidence at all.
Yeah, and when Ken Ham was asked this, he said nothing. Nothing would be able to change his mind, and that's really telling
so you
about...
have disqualified yourself. He is disqualifying himself from scientific discourse because that's not how science works. So.
And AB said in the chat said that's one thing about with climate change. The deniers want to debate whether it's happening and hampering progress. The debate should be around what we are going to do about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, data doesn't lie. I think that you can have a discussion about details and, of course, what to do about it. Certainly. Yeah, climate is a tricky one. It's a tricky one because it's hard to understand. We're talking about very chaotic systems, and it's very easy to, and there's a lot of political motives to skew things one way or another. So that is a quagmire that may be, it's definitely one of the biggest challenges to come. Although I consider it a subset of the general challenge that we've been discussing all along of how to have an informed populace that is capable of not falling for every ridiculous pseudoscientific thing that comes our way. That's really the bigger issue here. I think that we have to figure out in the next 20 or 30 years, or it's, I'm an optimist, but some Orwellian future. If you think that that's not a possibility whatsoever, I don't think it's going to happen, but it'd be naive to think that it's impossible, and we need to figure out how to make sure it does not happen. And we need humans together to be smarter to not let that happen.
One of the things when it comes to climate change is is because one of the things that happened a long time ago was you would remember the hole in the ozone layer, right? How that used to be an issue.
And I think we're pretty close to that being patched up. But yeah, obviously, I remember when that was a huge issue.
Yeah, and that was something that we took action to fix, or as a species, we took action to fix it, and then we were able to get it pretty fixed. Imagine if there were climate change deniers like we've got now back then that stopped that from being fixed. Like said, something along the lines of, it doesn't feel like I'm getting hit with more UV light or anything, or something.
Yeah. The problem is that no, obviously you're making a completely valid point. The issue is that banning CFCs did not upend entire multi-billion-dollar industries, which curbing emissions or eliminating emissions will. So, again, I'm not an economist. What I don't understand is how come these gigantic oil conglomerates, why don't you just invest in alternative energies and be the king of that instead? Why don't you be the mega super rich version of solar and wind instead? You have the money. I mean, I don't understand. I am nowhere near, I shouldn't even be talking about economics, but, look, it's untenable. What we're doing is untenable. And, why? It's just hard for me to wrap my head around why people don't just invest in these newer technologies that are going to happen. They're inevitable. Just get on top of it, and you're going to be rich forever. Don't worry about it. Just stop screwing over everyone else.
Yeah, there's been some people that claim that that renewables are a scheme by Rockefeller or something because they started investing in renewables lately, and it's a case of what you're going on about just then, where they should be investing in renewables because that's going to be the future. One person does want to know what you believe about nuclear power.
Yeah, so this one, I wouldn't say that it's like a big cause of mine, but I do like to talk about nuclear fusion. I think that fusion is a huge thing in our future. There's so many problems, and it just gets a bad rap because it has the word nuclear in it, and so people think about fission, and they think about Chernobyl, and this is bad stuff. Obviously, that those were bad things that happened, but fusion is not fission. It's totally different. It utilizes nuclear energy, but we're not using radioactive fissionable material. There are no radioactive byproducts. We're using hydrogen is the fuel, right? We're fusing. It's the same thing that happens in the sun. And, one fusion plant could power a time zone. You know what I mean? It's like, this is, in one, I don't know, a lot of, multiple states.
Yeah. So, imagine if someone put a ban on all nuclear reactors, and you weren't allowed to get power from any nuclear reactors. You'd have to basically ban the sun.
I guess if you want to apply the definition very rigidly, I think so. But I mean, look, people who cite nuclear fission as a danger and look, I mean, bad stuff happened, and no one's going to pretend that it didn't. It was bad, but it's just people who think fusion is the same thing. They don't know what fusion is. They don't know what a fusion reactor does.
Well, when I've gone ahead and looked at a whole lot of meltdowns, and there's three major meltdowns of fission reactors. There's the Chernobyl, Fukushima, and Long Island, and that's not a lot when you actually think about it. There's been smaller scale meltdowns that generally, I think they've generally been partial meltdowns that haven't had any kind of catastrophe.
Yeah. Chernobyl was the big one, which, by the way, if anyone watching, if you haven't seen that, I think it was on HBO or where was it? They did a series on Chernobyl. It's freaking awesome. It's so fascinating. I highly recommend that miniseries. But look, the point is, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that saying that nuclear fission is dangerous is wrong. Yeah, it is. Look, but we don't have to do it. Let's do fusion instead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, don't shut down. I don't know how many fission reactors are active in the world. I have no clue. But if they're active, I don't know. Maybe keep going. But just what I'm saying is let's focus on fusion and build some fusion plants, because those dangers that are real and are very valid to be cited with fission, they do not exist in fusion. It does not. They're completely different processes, and we cannot let the fear of the word nuclear prevent us from a new energy paradigm. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. AB Science just said Chernobyl series was good, but they over-exaggerated the deaths.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be true. But I think that the number of deaths from cancer in the greater European region, Eastern European region, was really big. I mean, from material that kind of traveled into other countries, and so there was I think that it's true that the deaths in the region were not that numerous, but the effect, the large scale effect was pretty bad.
Okay.
So it's
one of the things that I did have a discussion with a while back with I had a discussion with Fight the Flat Earth, Landon Knoll, and Steve McRae. One of those people, Landon Knoll, wasn't able to comment on a lot of things about fusion because he said, I'm not authorized to comment on that, so not actually...
Okay. Authorized? But who is not authorizing him? I don't understand.
I think he might have something to do with the fusion reactors being built over in Europe. So that is something that you do have to take with a grain of salt. But it was a great discussion. Not Landon Knoll, Fight the Flat Earth and Steve McRae, they had both had experience with working in nuclear power plants or something like that. I can't remember exactly what they did, but essentially I invited them on for a talk about nuclear power because it's something that I'm particularly interested in, especially if to stop climate change. I think that using both renewables and nuclear energy is a good way to transition away from fossil fuels.
Talk about renewable. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. We will never run out of hydrogen ever. So
true.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm not super up to speed on it, but I'm in Camp Fusion. I think it's going to be a great thing for our civilization.
One person says Landon does research for Livermore. So that would probably be why he...
Yeah.
Yeah. And then FTFE and Steve were Navy power techs. So they would have worked with that. One of the things that I do find interesting is a couple of... There's two other sort of nuclear power ideas that are currently circulating, and that's Thorium Power. Have you heard of that one?
No.
Okay. It's something that a lot of people are saying will be a lot safer than uranium because it uses thorium instead, and I think it's molten salt reactors or something. And then there's a way to use the spent rods from nuclear power. that I think Bill Gates is wanting to invest into.
Interesting. Yeah. No, I don't know about it.
Okay, fair enough. One thing I did want to...
I actually do have to jet pretty soon here.
Yeah, I was about to...
Just as a heads up.
Yeah, I was about to end things up with one last question that I have for you. Do you think that Flat Earth has had a sort of side effect of people getting more into science? That, you know, people go ahead and debunk Flat Earth and they actually want to learn about science and then get into science?
Maybe. I have had comments that say as much on my videos. Yeah, I don't know how common that reaction is, but I'm sure it has happened, you know, with some frequency that people say, "Oh, this is silly." Yeah, I think a lot of people say about some of my debunks, or at least like the first one with the globusters, is, "Oh, like I didn't know that about, you know, such and such phenomenon." So, I don't know if it necessarily drives them to get a very broad knowledge of astronomy. Maybe in some cases, but. Yeah, so maybe the question is, did it, and I say did because it's gotta be winding down, did it have a net positive effect on us? Maybe net neutral, I would say.
Yeah, but, I know that I can definitely speak for myself, where I've learnt a lot more about physics and science in general from Flat Earth, and that was actually going to be my next question is, do you think it's had a net positive or net negative? And so yeah, probably net neutral. I think it turns some people on to investigating science, but you know, it pulls people into these conspiratorial rabbit holes, and it does not end there. It never ends there. It transfers to anti-vax and this business with COVID, and you know, the COVID's not real, and the 5G and this. I mean, it just never ends. Like the conspiratorial frame of mind does not limit itself to one phenomenon, right? Yeah. That type of person will swallow every single thing they come across, making them so easy to control. All you have to do is appeal to that narrative and paint yourself as one of these rebels fighting the man, and you are their saint, their savior, and they will do anything you say. And it's a big problem. It's a huge problem. Yeah, I generally take the stance of Flat Earth seems to be more of the end of the road sort of thing. Like, Flat Earth is the last conspiracy you get into. Like, you get into anti-vax, 9/11, all that kind of stuff, and then once you're at Flat Earth, like you've believed in every conspiracy, maybe except for the lizard people or something like that.
Yeah, that's in there too. There are people who believe in every conspiracy except Flat Earth. So it's definitely by far the dumbest one that has ever existed. I mean, that's why, you know, I'm sounding a little conspiratorial myself, but I think that there is some credence to be lent to the PSYOP narrative of it, because it's just too dumb a thing for it to have been dreamt up. You know, it would not have gained steam without some kind of catalyst, and I don't think we can rule out the idea that it was deliberately put out there as some sort of a, you know, social experiment or something.
Yeah, I actually find it funny when Flat Earthers comment on my tinfoil hat and say, and then say, "Oh, he looks so paranoid with his tinfoil hat." And it's like, this tinfoil hat is meant to mock people that are crazy tinfoilers, but yeah. It's real. Like, it is rather strange. But anyway, I'll end it up there, and actually, that's the wrong thing to go to. That's also the wrong thing to go to. Jeez. But yes, make sure you check out Professor Dave if you haven't already. I think most people will have already heard of you. You seem to be quite a popular name recently.
Doing my best, just sticking my neck out there and pissing off as many people as possible, apparently. So.
And also, make sure you go check out his music channel so that he can get into music stuff. And
yes, please.
I will see you in the next stream. Between you and me, thank you for watching.
Bye, everybody.